Everybody brings in transfers, but who's the most important transfer? That's something I'll be examining in the coming weeks here on the show for more than one team. Arizona State's up first, not just because they have A in their name and abbreviation, and it's early-ish in the alphabet. I think I don't really remember, but Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils is here to answer that question. So just start there. Who's Arizona State's most important transfer?
They've got a lot of big guys and big names that are coming into this program, but I feel like it starts and maybe even ends with Kanye Udo, the running back from Army. Spencer, he ran for 1,100 yards last year for Army, less than 200 carries. And keep in mind, their quarterback had over 300. And double-digit running backs touched the ball last year. Like, for him to have that effectiveness that he did, he saw the end zone 10 times, averaging well over 5 yards per carry. I think he was flirting with 6 yards a carry last year. Like, this kid is a special talent, and he has to come in and replace Cam Skattebo, the people's running back. There is no replacing Cam Skattebo, don't get me wrong. But if you are having a guy come in to help replace his production in the aggregate, right, in Moneyball sense, like that's the guy you want to start with, is someone that is a dynamic runner and can find the end zone. So it starts there with Kanye Udo.
Yeah, and Udo is not someone that I think garnered a lot of attention last year because Bryson Daly was garnering all the attention as Army was, flying up the top 25 rankings and garnering consideration for, hey, is this a college football playoff team? Like, what are we doing here? I mean, if they had been able to beat Notre Dame, they weren't, of course, the Irish were a much better team, then Army would have been in legitimate consideration to be the highest ranked group of five conference. Heck, they could have been in over Clemson if they'd gone undefeated. Mm-hmm. But alas, Richie, as my grandfather pointed out to me recently, they weren't even able to beat Navy. So, I mean, how good could Kanye Udo be recently that his team wasn't able to come up in America's college football game? But realistically, though, on a more serious note, if he comes in and is blank percentage of what Cameron Skattebo was last year, what is that percentage to carry Arizona State to a conference championship?
The percentage. You see, what's so interesting is ASU's got a really good backfield, too. Kyson Brown is returning for his third season. He was the number 2 back behind Cam last year, and he looks more than workable as a potential running back 1 for this team. And I think in a best case scenario, you could have him and Udo as like a running back 1, running back 2, like A and B kind of situation. So if those two are able to play up to their potential, you could replace Cam's 1,700 rushing yards with those two. Maybe one of them scrapes 1,000. The other one is able to get 600 and change and collectively get that. But how do you replace the receiving production? Udo has 2 career catches for 0 yards. One of them was -1. One of them was 1 over 2 seasons. He's not the guy to do that. You have Raleek Brown, who's injury plagued throughout his collegiate career. He is a former 5-star. When he was at USC, they felt so confident about his receiving skills, they moved him from running back to receiver. So you need some health to go your way. And, health is as unpredictable as it comes. But you have a group that will try and replace Cameron Skattebo's production. If there's a guy who's going to replace the most of it, it has to be Udo. If you're looking for a percentage, that's so tough. Like, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do
percentages are also hard? So let's say
right.
Of his 2,300 rushing and receiving yards combined last year, how many does Udo need to have for Arizona State to be back in the Big 12 championship game?
Anywhere between 1,000 and 1,200. And I need most of that to be as a runner. Like, I can get the receiving production from Raleek Brown. I can get it from Kyson Brown, who has shown some potential. Like, I don't need to force Kanye into that role. I spoke with him on Locked On Sun Devils. You guys should check that out if you have not. He is confident in himself to be a receiver. He did some of that when he was in high school. Army doesn't throw the football, let alone to the running back. So he could do some stuff in the passing game, but I'm not placing that on him. I need the rushing production to come from Udo. And of the 1,700 yards that Cam had last year, I need him to get to 1,000 for sure, or just find a way for him and Kyson to split like 800 each or something. But of the amount of yards he had, I need most of it to come from being a runner, and we'll figure out the passing stuff.
And of course, the most important consideration here, Richie. can he throw the ball when called upon? Because the Wild Skattebo is a grand and glorious endeavor that the Sun Devils embarked upon in 2023. That wasn't as fun. But then it was whipped out in a big spot against Texas. Now with Sam Levitt back for another year, you probably don't need to have that. But I don't know. Could he throw a pass? Has he thrown a pass before?
I don't know. He might have done it in high school, but you just aren't going to have that trick play guy this year, unfortunately. There was a 4-star coming in named Cam Dyer, who was a quarterback in New Mexico. 4-star in New Mexico. You got to be pretty good for that. Played quarterback. Hines Ward, former Steeler receiver, recruited him to be receiver. Kenny Dillingham was like, that's a quarterback. So we were going into the spring and we were like, there's your trick play guy. You can line him up at receiver or he plays quarterback, but unfortunately he will miss the year. With him out, I don't think you got a trick play guy. But who knows? Maybe we line up Kanye back there and just say, how far can you throw it? And can you hit Sam Levitt in stride? That's the most important question.
That is indeed. Yeah, Skattebo, 42-yard touchdown in the playoff quarterfinal against Texas, and in a big spot that helped propel the comeback there. But any running back, Udo or whoever it is in the country, Richie, isn't going to succeed if you don't have a good offensive line. But where great running backs separate themselves is when they get to the second level. Safeties and corners struggle to tackle them. They can make some running backs miss. But if you don't have holes to run through, then it's not going to really matter how good of a running back you have. And that was true at times for Skattebo last year. I think you saw that against Texas, where they got stopped on a couple of fourth downs. Why? Didn't necessarily love the utter lack of creativity in the play calls. And it was just, let's try and overpower one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. That was a bold strategy, Cotton, that didn't go very well.
Not well.
But if you can't get any push, then it doesn't matter. So how do you feel about Arizona State's offensive line to clear the path for Udo to run for 11, 12, or 1,300 yards?
I like that there's so much continuity coming back. And it's funny because we're talking about how they struggled last year. So you hear me say 4 or 5 starters are back, and you would think that's not a good thing. But there are some really, really good players. Like left guard Ben Coleman was a honorable mention, or he might have been second team Big 12 this year. A couple of years ago when he was at Cal, he was an all-conference player for the Pac-12. This is a RIP.
RIP.
Very, very accomplished player. He was healthy last year. He dominated. If he's able to continue playing well, that's great for ASU. The left tackle, Josh Atkins, I like him. And then the right side has the continuity. And that word right there is what I think is most important for the offensive line is continuity. Because in Kenny's first 2 years, they've had to reassemble this offensive line through the transfer portal, and there's just been so many moving pieces. But with 4 or 5 starters from last year that are back, now these guys will be able to start gelling together. You need to find a home run at center. Lee Fotanu, who was first team all-conference, that's as difficult a guy to replace as any. But having the rest of those guys back with the same offensive line coach in Saga Tuateli and the offensive scheme and everything, as long as they're able to gel together, build the confidence together, and all that good stuff, I do think the offensive line does take a step forward this year. And they were a pretty good run blocking team, especially towards the end of the year when you could tell that they started to know how to work and talk with each other. I have confidence there. Let's see how they do all over the place, but I do think that they should be able to take a step forward this year, if for no other reason than the continuity.